Everyone knows Switzerland for its snow-covered mountains, luxury watches, and world-famous chocolate. It is often portrayed as a peaceful country hidden among the Alps, a place of quiet villages, pristine lakes, and breathtaking landscapes. To many people, Switzerland feels almost detached from the struggles and ambitions that have shaped world history. Yet beneath this calm image lies one of the most fascinating paradoxes in modern geopolitics. Switzerland has no coastline. It possesses no vast natural resources. It never built a colonial empire. It never ruled distant continents. It never commanded enormous armies capable of reshaping the world through force. And yet, despite all of those apparent disadvantages, Switzerland became one of the most influential countries on Earth. Global wealth flows through its financial institutions. International organizations gather within its borders. Diplomats from rival nations meet on Swiss soil. Some of the world's most important negotiations have taken place in Swiss cities. For centuries, nations pursued power through conquest. They built empires, fought wars, and expanded their borders. Switzerland chose another path entirely. It discovered that influence could be built without domination. That stability could become an asset. That trust could become a form of power. The story of Switzerland challenges one of history's oldest assumptions, that power belongs only to those who possess the largest armies or the biggest empires. Because Switzerland became powerful not by controlling the world, but by becoming a place the world could rely upon. To understand how this happened, we must begin with the geography that shaped Swiss history from the very beginning. At first glance, Switzerland appears to be a nation that should have remained small and largely irrelevant in world affairs. Its geography seems to work against it. The country sits in the heart of Europe, surrounded by larger and historically more powerful neighbors. France lies to the west, Germany to the north, Austria to the east, Italy to the south. For much of history, these regions were home to kingdoms, empires, and military powers that competed relentlessly for influence. Switzerland, by comparison, was a collection of mountain communities scattered across difficult terrain. The Alps dominate much of the landscape. While beautiful, these mountains presented enormous challenges for economic development, communication, and political unity. Yet the same mountains that created obstacles also provided protection. Throughout the Middle Ages, mountain passes became both barriers and strategic gateways. Communities living within these valleys learned an important lesson very early in their history. Survival depended on cooperation. In 1291, several small cantons formed alliances for mutual defense. Over time, these alliances expanded, creating the foundations of what would eventually become the Swiss Confederation. Unlike many European states, Switzerland was not born from imperial ambition. It emerged from necessity. The early Swiss did not dream of conquering distant lands. They focused on protecting their homes. This difference would shape the nation's political culture for centuries. As Europe entered periods of constant warfare, Swiss communities developed a reputation for resilience and military competence. Swiss mercenaries became highly sought after throughout Europe due to their discipline and effectiveness. Ironically, Switzerland gained military respect while gradually becoming less interested in military expansion. The nation understood a simple reality. It could never outcompete the great power surrounding it. France possessed larger armies. Austria controlled vast territories. Prussia was becoming a military machine. Trying to dominate Europe would have been impossible. Instead, Switzerland pursued a different strategy. It focused on preserving independence rather than projecting power. This approach reached a turning point during the Napoleonic era. The French Revolutionary Wars and the rise of Napoleon transformed Europe. Borders shifted, kingdoms collapsed, entire political systems disappeared. Switzerland experienced occupation and political turmoil during this period, but the chaos also revealed something important. Being caught between competing powers was dangerous. The country needed a long-term strategy that would allow it to survive regardless of who dominated Europe. That strategy became neutrality. In 1815, after Napoleon's defeat, the Congress of Vienna formally recognized Swiss neutrality. For many nations, neutrality might have seemed like a passive policy. For Switzerland, it became a national mission. Neutrality was not about avoiding responsibility. It was about creating stability in a continent defined by instability. While neighboring countries repeatedly found themselves pulled into conflicts, Switzerland remained outside most of them. This decision required discipline. It demanded careful diplomacy. It required maintaining enough defensive capability to discourage invasion while avoiding actions that might be perceived as threatening. Over time, neutrality became deeply embedded in Swiss identity. The policy proved particularly valuable during the 20th century. Europe experienced two catastrophic world wars. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions of lives were lost. Empires vanished from the map. Political systems collapsed. Yet Switzerland remained intact. Its position was never entirely risk-free. The country mobilized its military and prepared for potential invasion during both world wars. Surrounded by conflict, Swiss leaders understood that survival could never be taken for granted. Nevertheless, neutrality helped Switzerland avoid the devastation that consumed much of Europe. When the wars ended, many countries faced the enormous task of rebuilding shattered economies and damaged institutions. Switzerland entered the post-war era with its infrastructure intact. Its political system remained stable. Its economy remained functional. Its reputation remained strong. This continuity gave Switzerland an advantage that would become increasingly valuable in the decades ahead. Because while wars create destruction, stability creates trust. And trust, as Switzerland would soon discover, can be transformed into something even more powerful: wealth.
How much for the tomatoes?
$3.50 a kilo
Neutrality
today, very
gave
fresh.
Switzerland stability. But stability alone does not create influence. Many countries have experienced long periods of peace without becoming powerful. Switzerland's true transformation began when it discovered how to turn trust into an economic asset. This was the moment when a small mountain nation started building a form of influence unlike anything Europe had seen before. Throughout the 19th century, Europe was a continent in constant motion. Industrialization was reshaping economies. New technologies were connecting markets. Railways crossed borders. Factories expanded. Trade accelerated. At the same time, political instability remained a constant reality. Revolutions erupted. Governments changed. Empires competed for influence. Financial crises periodically swept across entire regions. For wealthy individuals, merchants, and investors, protecting assets became just as important as growing them. And when people searched for safety, they increasingly looked towards Switzerland. The country offered something rare: predictability. While neighboring states experienced political upheaval, Switzerland maintained stable institutions. While governments rose and fell elsewhere, Swiss laws remained reliable. This consistency became a magnet for capital. Money, much like people, seek security. The more uncertainty existed in the world, the more valuable Switzerland became. Over time, Swiss banks earned a reputation for professionalism and discretion. Clients trusted them not only because they were efficient, but because they operated within a system that valued stability above all else. This reputation became one of Switzerland's greatest competitive advantages. By the early 20th century, Swiss financial institutions were attracting clients from across Europe and beyond. Business leaders deposited assets there. Industrialists protected their fortunes there. Families seeking long-term security increasingly viewed Switzerland as a safe harbor in an unpredictable world. Then came the great shocks of the 20th century. The First World War devastated Europe. Entire economies collapsed under the strain of conflict. Governments borrowed enormous sums. Currencies became unstable. Millions lost confidence in financial systems that had once appeared permanent. Switzerland, however, remained comparatively stable. Its neutrality protected it from much of the destruction affecting neighboring countries. For international investors, this reinforced an important lesson. Swiss stability was not temporary. It was structural. The pattern repeated itself after the Second World War. Much of Europe faced the enormous challenge of rebuilding cities, industries, and financial institutions. Switzerland emerged with its infrastructure largely intact. Its banking sector remained functional. Its reputation grew even stronger. By now, Switzerland had become something more than a country. It had become a symbol of security, a symbol of reliability, a symbol of trust. One of the most significant developments came in 1934 with the introduction of strict banking secrecy laws. These regulations strengthened client confidentiality and further enhanced Switzerland's reputation as a secure place to store wealth. For decades, Swiss banking secrecy became almost legendary. Whether admired or criticized, it reinforced the idea that Switzerland was different from other financial centers. People believed their assets would be protected. And in finance, perception can be as powerful as reality. As wealth flowed into Switzerland, cities such as Zurich and Geneva evolved into global financial hubs. Banks expanded. Financial expertise deepened. International connections multiplied. An entire ecosystem developed around wealth management, investment services, insurance, and international finance. The country discovered a profound truth about power. Influence does not always require controlling people. Sometimes it comes from becoming indispensable to them. The world's wealthy increasingly relied on Swiss institutions. International businesses relied on Swiss expertise. Global markets viewed Swiss stability as a benchmark. The Swiss franc itself became associated with confidence and resilience. Even during periods of economic uncertainty, many investors viewed Switzerland as a safe destination. This reputation generated extraordinary benefits. The financial sector created jobs. It attracted talent. It generated tax revenues. It supported innovation. Most importantly, it connected Switzerland to every major economy on Earth. A nation that once seemed isolated among the Alps was now deeply woven into the fabric of global finance. Yet the story goes beyond money. The real source of Swiss influence was not its banks alone. Banks can be copied. Financial centers can be replicated. The deeper asset was trust itself. Trust cannot be built overnight. It is earned slowly, protected carefully, and easily destroyed. For generations, Switzerland cultivated that trust through stable governance, predictable institutions, and a commitment to neutrality. The result was extraordinary. By the late 20th century, Switzerland had become one of the wealthiest countries in the world despite lacking many of the traditional foundations of national power. No empire, no vast territory, no enormous military. Instead, it possessed something far more valuable: confidence. And confidence attracted wealth. Wealth attracted influence. And influence expanded Switzerland's role far beyond what its size would suggest. But financial power was only one piece of the puzzle. Because as Switzerland became a trusted guardian of wealth, it was also becoming something else: a trusted meeting place for the world itself. For most of human history, powerful nations projected influence through military force. The Roman Empire expanded through conquest. The British Empire controlled vast territories across multiple continents. The United States built military alliances spanning the globe. Again and again, history seemed to deliver the same lesson. Power belonged to those who could impose their will on others. Switzerland challenged that assumption. It never built an empire. It never controlled distant colonies. It never stationed military forces across the world. Yet somehow, its influence continued to grow. The reason lies in something many nations struggle to achieve:
How did we let the
trust.
losses get this
By the middle of
bad?
the 20th century,
This is a
Switzerland had
failure of
developed a
leadership.
reputation unlike almost any other country on Earth. It was viewed as neutral, stable, predictable, safe. These qualities made Switzerland valuable not only as a financial center, but also as a diplomatic one. and nowhere symbolized this transformation more clearly than Geneva. Located on the shores of Lake Geneva, the city gradually evolved into one of the most important diplomatic capitals in the world. Unlike cities associated with major powers, Geneva did not represent military dominance or geopolitical ambition. Instead, it represented neutrality.
Into position.
This distinction mattered enormously. When rival nations needed a place to meet, Geneva offered common ground. When tensions rose between competing powers, Switzerland provided a setting where dialogue could continue. When international organizations searched for a home, Geneva became an obvious choice. Over time, the city transformed into a global crossroads. Diplomats arrived from every continent. Delegations gathered for negotiations. International conferences became a regular part of life. Geneva was no longer merely a Swiss city. It had become a meeting place for the world. One of the earliest examples of Switzerland's growing international role emerged in the 19th century with the founding of the International Committee of the Red Cross. The organization was established in Geneva in 1863 and would go on to become one of the most respected humanitarian institutions in history. Its mission reflected values that were increasingly associated with Switzerland itself: neutrality, human dignity, protection during conflict. The Red Cross reinforced Switzerland's image as a country that could operate above political divisions, a nation that could serve humanity without taking sides. This reputation became even more important during the turbulent decades that followed. The 20th century witnessed ideological conflicts on an unprecedented scale. Capitalism and communism competed for influence. Superpowers confronted one another across continents. Wars erupted in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Yet throughout these crises, Switzerland maintained its role as a trusted intermediary. During the Cold War, the world was divided into opposing camps. Suspicion defined international relations. Communication between rivals was often limited. In such an environment, neutral territory became incredibly valuable. Swiss cities frequently hosted discussions that would have been difficult to organize elsewhere. Because both sides trusted the venue, that trust was not accidental. It was the result of decades of consistent behavior. Switzerland had spent generations proving that it could remain neutral even during periods of extraordinary tension. As a result, nations that distrusted each other often trusted Switzerland. This created a remarkable form of influence. Not influence based on coercion, not influence based on military strength, but influence based on credibility. And credibility can be one of the most powerful resources in international affairs. When people believe you are impartial, they are willing to sit at your table. When nations believe you can be trusted, they are willing to negotiate on your soil. When organizations believe your institutions are reliable, they are willing to establish headquarters within your borders. This is precisely what happened in Switzerland. Over time, Geneva became home to numerous international organizations, diplomatic missions, and global forums. Some of the world's most important conversations began there. Others ended there. Many never appeared in headlines at all, yet their impact was felt across continents. This highlights a truth that is often overlooked. The most visible forms of power are not always the most important. Aircraft carriers attract attention. Missile systems attract attention. Political speeches attract attention. But influence frequently operates behind closed doors. It exists in the ability to bring people together, to facilitate dialogue, to create environments where agreements become possible. Switzerland mastered this quieter form of power. It became a place where rivals could meet without feeling threatened, a place where difficult conversations could happen, a place where trust made cooperation possible. This role dramatically expanded Switzerland's global significance. The country remained geographically small. Its population remained modest. Yet its relevance to international affairs continued to grow, because Switzerland had discovered something many larger nations failed to understand. In a divided world, trusted intermediaries become indispensable, and indispensable nations possess a unique kind of power. By the beginning of the 21st century, Switzerland's influence stretched far beyond its borders. not because it controlled other nations, but because it connected them, not because it demanded attention, but because others depended upon it. The country had transformed neutrality into diplomacy, diplomacy into influence, and influence into global relevance. Yet Switzerland's story is not merely historical. The forces that made it powerful have not disappeared. In many ways, they have become even more valuable in the modern world. Because in an era defined by uncertainty, trust may be more important than ever before. In many ways, Switzerland's greatest achievement is not what it accomplished in the past. It is the fact that its model continues to work today. The modern world looks very different from the Europe that gave birth to Swiss neutrality. Empires have disappeared. Technology has transformed communication. Globalization has connected economies across continents. Information travels instantly. Capital moves across borders in seconds. Yet despite these dramatic changes, Switzerland remains one of the most stable, prosperous, and influential countries in the world. This raises an important question. Why? Why does a nation of fewer than 10 million people continue to matter in a world dominated by giants such as the United States, China, and the European Union? The answer lies in the same principles that shaped Switzerland centuries ago. Trust, stability, reliability. These qualities have become increasingly valuable in an age defined by uncertainty. Modern economies depend on confidence. Investors need confidence. Businesses need confidence. Governments need confidence. Without trust, financial systems become fragile. Without trust, institutions lose legitimacy. Without trust, cooperation becomes difficult. Switzerland understood this long before many others. Rather than constantly reinventing itself, the country focused on strengthening the foundations that made trust possible. Stable governance, predictable laws, strong institutions, long-term thinking. These characteristics helped Switzerland maintain one of the highest standards of living in the world. Its economy became known not only for banking, but also for precision manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, engineering, and innovation. Swiss companies earned global reputations because they reflected the same qualities associated with the nation itself: reliability, quality, consistency. In many ways, Switzerland turned its national identity into an economic advantage. The world trusted Swiss products because it trusted Switzerland. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Swiss power is how invisible it often appears. When people discuss powerful countries, they usually think of military budgets, aircraft carriers, or geopolitical rivalries. Switzerland rarely enters those conversations. And yet influence does not disappear simply because it is quiet. In fact, some forms of power become stronger precisely because they attract less attention. A trusted financial center, a respected diplomatic venue, a stable political system, a reliable legal environment. These are not dramatic symbols of power. They do not dominate headlines, but they shape decisions made by governments, corporations, investors, and international organizations every single day. Switzerland occupies a unique position within the global system because it provides something that many others struggle to offer: predictability. And predictability has become increasingly rare. The 21st century has been marked by financial crises, political polarization, regional conflicts, and growing geopolitical competition. Nations that once appeared stable have experienced uncertainty. Institutions that once seemed permanent have faced challenges. Trust has become harder to build and easier to lose. Against this backdrop, Switzerland's reputation has become even more valuable. Because when uncertainty increases, trusted institutions become more important. This may be the most important lesson Switzerland offers the world. Power is often misunderstood. History teaches us to associate power with conquest, with armies, with territory, with dominance. But Switzerland demonstrates another possibility. A country can become influential not by controlling others, but by becoming indispensable to them. Not by forcing cooperation, but by creating conditions where cooperation becomes possible. Not by generating fear, but by earning confidence. For centuries, Switzerland invested in trust when others invested in power. Over time, that trust became power. The mountains never changed. The country never expanded into an empire. Its population remained relatively small. Yet its influence continued to grow because influence was never really about size. It was about credibility. Switzerland discovered something that many nations still struggle to understand. The strongest foundations of power are often invisible. They are built slowly. They require patience. They cannot be conquered. They must be earned. And once earned, they become extraordinarily valuable. Switzerland never ruled the world. It never sought to. Yet by becoming a place that the world could trust, it achieved something remarkable. It became one of the most influential nations on Earth. Not through force, not through fear, not through conquest, but through stability, through reliability, through trust. And in a world where trust is increasingly scarce, that may be the greatest power of all.